We have one public hearing tonight, a public hearing to consider adopting 5 sections of a development code, including regulations for streets, access management, subdivisions, site plans, improvement plans, and utilities. This public hearing is open for anyone that would like to address this this evening. Kelly?
We have a short presentation. There's a lot of information in here, so we're going to be talking very quickly like Nicolette did.
Good.
Study session. So bear with me. Martha, would you mind getting the light?
She got some of that coffee.
That's right.
Okay, I know we've been through some of this before, so let me just quickly recap where we've been and where we're going and why. Basically, I'd like to thank a lot of entities that have helped us pull all this together. There's 3 names up there, but there are certainly more people involved than just the 3 of us. We work closely with Public Safety, Police and Fire, DRG, and all the attendees in that group. The Public Works section or group helped quite a bit with the utility section. Planning and Zoning, of course, was instrumental in this. They formed a subcommittee for this development code, and with them we had open houses, and then we also had public hearings at their P&Z meetings, in addition to the public hearings that we're having here. We've opened it up to the development community, even just a one-on-one outside of the open houses and the public hearings. So Martha and I have talked quite a bit with them, and those are the developers and the consulting firms. Basically what we have is 3 chapters. We have a streets and sidewalks chapter, we have a water and sewers chapter, and then we have a subdivision chapter. And what's happened in the past is if developers come into town and they're not actually subdividing a parcel, then they don't have to follow these rules. And that's not really how the intent of this was. The intent was for it to be all development follows the same rules, regardless whether you're subdividing your piece of property or not. So what we've taken, or what we've done, is we've created this development code. So the subdivision chapter goes away, the new chapter is a development code, and then within the development code chapter there's an article on subdivisions. Our chapters 24 and 29, the streets and sidewalks chapter and the water and sewers chapter, those will become use of chapters, and then anything that was currently in those chapters that pertain to development will get pulled out of those and put in this development code chapter. So you can start seeing very quickly that the main reason for this was to start streamlining some processes. Sorry, I'm not clicking. The main reason for doing this is streamlining the processes and making it easier for developer to come in. Now, a lot of our local developers, they understand how we develop in this community and they know where to find all of our ordinances, but if somebody's coming from outside of town, it's difficult for them to find this information. So tonight we'll be talking about streets, access management, utility subdivision, site plans, and improvement plans. And you guys know that up to date, we've talked about general provisions, off-street parking, exterior lighting, billboard signs, fences, landscaping, and buffer yards. These are the final articles of the development code chapter that we'll be presenting tonight. Okay, so I've already talked, why are we doing this? Just to make it easier, less confusion, streamlining processes. I've already gone through this, not following my PowerPoint. Okay, streets. Okay, so these are several of the divisions within the article of streets. We've changed some of the things regarding numbering system, which that's just going to help police and fire find houses easier. You know, we're setting out a standard height for your numbering system on your house. Just different things like that. Some of these are very, very minor, but very important to particularly police and fire. Street names, we're just getting some consistencies involved here. You know, I know Mr. Lanzotti doesn't like the split street names. We're trying to eliminate those kinds of things, eliminate duplications with street names out in the counties, those sorts of things. Sidewalks and trails. The time the street improvements are installed, the developer has to construct their sidewalks. This hasn't been the case in the past. And then we've also set a standard where these sidewalks have to be maintained in an acceptable condition at the time the occupancy permit is issued. So again, some things that really make sense, but we just never really had it written out in a good policy in the past. We've put a provision in there for multimodal trails. That's walking and biking trails for those of you that don't know. And we're not saying that you have to do them. We're just giving you a provision that if you want them within your development, what are the standards and guidelines to do that. set some standard numbers for blocks and pedestrian ways. One of the major thing that we found during all of this is that these codes hadn't been updated since 1967, and engineering standards and procedures and policies and even planning rules and regulations have changed since then, so we've just tried to update these things. We've created a new table for all of our street standards. These include street widths, whether you need a curb and gutter section, a sidewalk section, all of these kinds of things. And it's spelled out for the type of street that you're going to be developing. We're going to say that all streets are private, or public rather, from here on out. You know that we've had a lot of issues with this. We do have one exemption in there that if the developer really wants their street to be private, they can get that approval through the city manager only. And if they do that, they have to be built to our specifications and standards. The city will still inspect them. The developer will still pay city inspection fees. So quite honestly, there's no benefit really for a developer to do this, but if they really want private streets, we'll let them, but only under those circumstances, just so that we're not in this, in this predicament that we've been in the future. We encourage traffic calming measures, curbs, landscape medians, those kinds of things. Again, they're not required, but they're encouraged. One of the bigger things is we're saying that if a developer comes in and you create the need for a traffic signal at an intersection or a left turn lane because of your increase in traffic flows, you have to build it, and it's going to be your cost and not the city's cost. We just didn't think that that was fair for the city to be absorbing those kinds of costs. We updated some things regarding driveways. In this location, we talk about how the driveways are built. In access management, we talk about the spacing of driveways. We talk a lot about stormwater management, and we've talked a lot about that before in the past, the new EPA regulations that are coming down the line. Again, we're not telling developers that they have to put in permeable pavers or porous pavements, but we're encouraging them. So at least bringing these to their attention. So if we ever have to mandate that, with regard to EPA, then at least developers will be comfortable with it. Street lighting, we have a policy for street lighting, but a lot of developers didn't know about it, so we've just implemented that into this code. There weren't really any changes to that. And again, bicycle routes, that's similar to the multimodal trails, just telling them if they're going to build them, how they need to build them. Okay, moving right along to access management. What is access management? This is a completely new section altogether. Access management is careful planning and design of driveways, median openings, and property connections to a roadway. And my favorite example of this is look at Kings Highway and look at LaSalle. We don't want LaSalle looking like Kings Highway with all of the different access points. And the reason we don't want to is because that's that many more conflict points with traffic and potential for accidents and things of that nature. So that's what we're trying to implement, is just some careful planning of some of these streets. Now, quite honestly, a lot of developers don't come in building arterial streets, so they're not going to have to worry about these kinds of things. You know, a lot of this is just guidelines for the city whenever or if we ever build arterial streets. Access management is not retroactive. We've put some standards in there regarding cross access, truck movements, restrictive medians, median openings, arterial street connections, twiddles, which are two-way left turn lanes. I can go into all of these for a really, really long time, but I won't.
That was earlier.
Twiddles go down the middle. Okay, so then we talk about driveway spacing. This is kind of big that you all may want to know about. We did hear a little bit of grumbling in the development world about this, but quite honestly, I think they were okay with it. This is very different than what we've seen in the past. Our current regulations say that in a commercial and industrial area, 12 to 24 feet is your spacing. What we've done is we've taken that out. That doesn't make sense to us. What does make sense is making that with regard to a posted speed limit. Should determine your spacing of driveways. We've done a lot of research. Access management was probably the most lenient, and that's what we went with. A lot of other communities that we researched, they were even more strict than this and spaced them out even further. So we thought this was a big enough jump for our community, so that's where those numbers came from. Okay, next section are utilities. Again, remember we have some utility chapters, but we've decided to pull out the development portion of those, put them in this chapter, and then that other chapter will remain of use of. So how much is your water bill supposed to be, those kinds of things. In this chapter, we talk mainly about our public infrastructure, water and sanitary sewer. Again, provisions of this article are not retroactive. We talk about things like you have to make sure you have the proper flow. We don't want you to build a development and not think about fire flows and things of that nature. We set a minimum pipe size. One of the bigger things, we're saying now that valves and fire hydrants have to be supplied by the developer. Currently, the city supplies those. It honestly doesn't make a lot of sense, other than that chapter was adopted about the same time the city took on the water system. And so that's how it was done in the past, and it just kind of continued that way. So we're proposing to change that. Water main extensions, we've just added some more language in it to make it a little bit more clear. We didn't really change the meaning of it, I suppose. We also say that all of these costs have to be assumed by the applicant, which is how it's working now. Private water mains shall be prohibited. We say this because there's a lot of concerns with private water mains out there. We can have cross-contamination and all kinds of ugly things that you know, we don't want to see. We say that if you're going to relocate or adjust your main, you know, you have to make sure the proper grade is over it. And so you either may have to adjust your grade or you have to adjust your main. Regardless, you have to have the proper coverage over it. And in the same breath, we don't want mains out there that are 25 feet deep in the ground that Public Works can't maintain. And if no sewers are accessible, the county health department has provisions as far as septic tanks and things like that. It's not something that we encourage, obviously. We've put every provision in here that if you have the ability to hook up to our sewer system, that's what you have to do. But there are some cases where it's not accessible, and so then we put the provisions in there what they should do. And I'm going to let Martha talk for a little bit.
Only for a little bit. Does she give up the gavel? Subdivisions is, like Kelly said, right, there's a lot of reorganization, and the subdivision chapter is one of the major reorganizations. Chapter 25 right now is subdivisions. So instead of just dealing with subdivisions, chapter 25 now is the entire development code. Basically, what subdivision, the new article for subdivision will be describing how to process subdivision plats, what types of plats are needed, and the process for that. Currently, our chapter 25 contains a lot of standards which are now moving to the other articles of the development code, like streets and utilities. So right now, now subdivisions is basically just the process for subdividing. There is one major change that we're proposing with this, with the regulations, and that is that all subdivisions in the city have to go through the process. Right now, we have an exemption that if you're creating a subdivision where all the each parcel is over 3 acres in size, you don't have to go through our subdivision process. We're proposing to eliminate that exemption so that any subdivision goes through our process. So we make sure that the public infrastructure is there and the subdivision meets our standards. I'm doing the same thing, not clicking. Another major change is the provision for cluster subdivisions. We don't have a provision for cluster subdivisions right now. We'd like to add that. We think cluster subdivisions promote environmentally sensitive development. They promote the preservation of open space and, again, sensitive areas. We also are proposing that there be a little additional density available for developers who meet certain standards and benchmarks in developing cluster subdivisions.
Martha, can you define cluster subdivisions for perhaps our TV audience?
And I've got some, let me show you a picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. A conventional subdivision, when you subdivide the property, all of the property is in lots. In a cluster subdivision, you've got some of the property in lots, but a lot of it in open space. You can see these two different subdivisions. They each have the same number of lots in the same area. It's just the cluster subdivision has smaller lots that are clustered in groups, and a lot of the property is left for open space. This is why you're able to preserve the environmentally sensitive areas such as steep slopes, stream valleys. There may be an opportunity for some good open space like a public park, a neighborhood park that could be dedicated through cluster subdivisions. It's actually much less costly for a developer to develop cluster subdivisions because you've got less area in infrastructure. You typically have less miles of streets that they're building, less miles of sanitary sewer and water lines that they're building with a cluster subdivision. So they can be very beneficial for the developer as well. This is one example. I've got a couple other pictures to just show different types of cluster subdivisions that have been developed. We think this will be a good addition for our subdivision chapter or article, just allowing that provision, and we hope to be working with developers to make use of it.
Martha,
Now, Kelly, yeah.
Then in the cluster subdivision, you would have completely different regulations as far as lot size, wouldn't you? Than in a regular subdivision, they'd have to be
like in an R1 subdivision, the minimum lot sizes would not apply to a cluster subdivision. We would look at each cluster subdivision through the subdivision process and evaluate it, make sure that the lots were appropriate. But yeah, the cluster subdivision lots would not have to meet the rigid guidelines and standards of a conventional subdivision. Kelly will go back and talk about site plans and improvement plans.
We're almost done. When we redid the zoning ordinance, we made references to site plans, but there is nothing in our ordinance currently regarding site plans. Additionally, when it comes to development, the improvement plans is a critical aspect of that. So we decided to break this out into a separate article altogether and really explain the differences between site plans and improvement plans, and then what the expectations of each one of those are. A site plan is really, a single commercial development, and it's their site layout, where they want their parking lot, their building, where the public utilities, where they're going to access those kinds of things. The review of these are very critical because, as you know, we've just written all of these new development codes, and we need to make sure that they're abiding by those new rules. So this allows us that format to be able to check and make sure they're meeting all the requirements. Improvement plans, that's what the engineering office requires whenever development or redevelopment is coming together with public infrastructure. So we're going to make sure that the streets are being built to our standards, the water and sanitary are meeting our specifications and standards. And then again, this isn't really a change. We say in there that all of the public improvements need to be guaranteed by a letter of credit, bond, escrow agreement. Or we'll hold the record plat so that there's some sort of guarantee that the city's going to get the infrastructure that the developer is claiming they're going to build. So again, why do we want all these changes? There's the public safety aspect of it. There's less cost to the city, easier maintenance, and we want to stop reoccurring problems. One of the main things that I heard whenever I first started as a city engineer is, why are our streets breaking up and things like that. So we've worked very, very hard updating our engineering specifications and standards. Now we have to tell the developer street widths. We've told them now how thick to build it and what kind of base to put in there. Now we have to tell them how wide to build it and these kinds of things. And again, just to adhere to the current engineering design guidelines. And then what's next? Hopefully you all will adopt the new development code that we've worked very, very hard on. And then you all will bring before you updates to chapter 24 and 29. We just have to repeal all of those sections that I was telling you about so that we don't have the conflicts in the 2 different or 3 different chapters. And then our goal is to release a development manual that'll put all of this in a really easy to read format